Today, our tale begins in the late 80s and early 90s as a video game series called Mega Man takes the Nintendo Entertainment System by storm with 6 all-time classics of the side-scroller action genre. But by the mid-2000s, the collective weight of several mediocre games led to the Mega Man series petering out and dying, with fans' widespread calls to revive the series either met with silence or outright mockery. Seriously, you honestly wonder if Capcom actively hates their own fans. Then came a ray of hope. In 2013, Kenji Inafune, a graphics artist turned producer who is perplexingly credited as one of Mega Man's creators, announced that he was making a spiritual successor called Mighty Number 9. Fans were so excited the game's Kickstarter raised a whopping $4 million, and then those hopes were slowly grounded to paste. The game was delayed for over a year. It suddenly got picked up by major publisher Deep Silver despite being independently funded. It underwent an art shift that turned the graphics into generic crap. They tried to crowdfund another game while Mighty Number 9 was still being delayed, a game that was also revealed to already have studio backing, and it was all capped off with the worst marketing campaign this side of Ghostbusters 2016.
And make the bad guys cry like an anime fan on prom night.
You'd think the first thing they teach you in Marketing 101 is not to wildly insult your audience. Even the launch of the game was a total disaster, with X-Bone copies nowhere to be found, and digital Wii U copies glitched so badly there were rumors that it was bricking entire consoles. The game tanked so badly that it dropped at my local library less than 3 months after its initial release. So let's take a little more objective look at the game that shit itself at the starting line, a game that failed from the word go, another tale from the Towers of the Library! The game takes place in the present day. Weird. You're told this world is a utopian society where the world has renounced all forms of violence, which is why most of the corrupted robots you fight are military tactical units. They need these special forces to fight all the war in this violence-free utopian society. One day, robots all over the country go crazy, and the nation devolves into chaos. The CEO of the robot production company Cherry Dynamics jumps on the TV to claim that Dr. Blackwell, is behind the uprising. I'm a little suspicious of his story, though, because I don't think the CEO's voice actor is aware what subtlety is.
My fellow Americans, in this time of crisis...
His evil face is even on the game's launch screen. Dr. Sanda and Dr. Dr. White, deduce that the uprising is due to a virus that is totally not Roboenza, and they send Beck, aka Mighty Number 9, to suck the virus out of Dr. White's other Mighty Number robots so they can produce an antidote. See, Beck has the ability to siphon energy from other robots, and Dr. White is completely surprised he is able to do this thing he expressly designed Beck to do.
Beck, did you just absorb the cells of a weakened robot? Of course, I designed it with that capability.
Quick question, can't we just suck the exact same virus out of the security robots that die in 2 hits and make a cure that way? No? Okay, I'll just go fight the 8 specially designed murder bots with a 10-year-old kid then. The game couldn't decide if it wanted to have a classic Mega Man story of just kill the 8 evil robots or a more modern story with a fleshed out world. The game has cutscenes after every other level, and the cutscenes either delve into shit you can't possibly care about or try to provide exposition on the incredibly complex story of Stop the Bad Man. One of the cutscenes is just White and Sanda trying to figure out why Beck isn't affected by the virus, and we know so little about how anything in this world works that it's impossible to give a shit. And the dialogue is so badly written, it's sometimes hilarious. Dr. Sanda calls you during the ice level to convey surprise that the ice-powered robot has covered the level in ice. When you're hunting Mighty Number 3, he calls to express utter disbelief that the robot who can siphon electricity might possibly be behind a building's rolling blackouts. Mighty Number 1 telegraphs his attacks exclusively by sound, and Dr. White calls you halfway through to say, "You have to fight Mighty Number 1!" and he drowns out the boss's audio cues. Thanks, jackass! That advice was super helpful! Oh, and rather than actually explain how to play the game, all the game's mechanics are listed out in a damn encyclopedia for you to read. It's tedious. The game consists of 8 levels you can play in any order you want, each represented by one of the mighty numbers. Beat a level and kill the boss, and you get that boss's main weapon. The enemies get recycled heavily, but there's a decent variety to them, and many of them require you to do some quick maneuvering or observe and exploit their patterns to get by. It's a decent retro-style side-scroller, it's just everything that's built around the retro-style side-scroller that's problematic. Just like Mega Man, you can't shoot in any direction other than horizontal, but unlike Mega Man, they keep throwing airborne enemies at you that you can barely hit. Get you eventually, you son of a bitch! The big new element that's been added from Mega Man is the ability to dash. With a tap of the R button, you zoom to the left or right. It's a pretty fun mechanic to use, nimbly dashing around levels and maneuvering around enemies. The problem is they force this mechanic down your throat. Enemies take 3 times the gunfire if you don't kill them with the dash, bosses heal if you don't dash into them immediately after inflicting certain amounts of damage, and every damn level of the game has jumps that require precise use of the dash over pits that kill you instantly. Shit! This is where the game majorly diverges from Mega Man. The old games were always slow-paced and built around combat, whereas this is a fast-paced platformer that actively encourages speedrunning, and let's just say the fusion was not successful. The biggest problem with the game is that it's cheap, and I don't mean the production values are low, which they are, I mean the game is filled with cheap deaths. Every level has jumps that require precise use of the dash positioned over pits that kill you instantly, often with no chance to recover if you miss. So no matter what level you pick first, the game expects you to master this damn dash instantly. But the big problem is the bosses. Almost every attack that every boss has is designed to be nearly impossible to dodge on reflex alone, and each boss has so much health that you can't afford to tank any hits from them. The only way to kill any of the bosses is to memorize every single one of their attacks, memorize every single telegraph for their attacks so you can react ahead of time, and formulate exactly how to reliably dodge all of their attacks. This basically requires you dying to each boss several times until you've memorized everything about them for one perfect fight. That doesn't sound irritating until I add this huge caveat. You start with 3 lives, and when they're gone, you get kicked back to the start of the level. So every boss is specifically designed for you to die until you learn every intimate detail about them, and by the time you start getting an idea how to actually fight them, you're out of lives and have to start the level over just for another crack at the boss. Between bullshit platforming and bullshit bosses, you'll be forced to replay every single level several times, which is total bullshit. The first stage I tried was Mighty number 6, and he provides a fairly effective example of the game's baloney. We'll skip past the jump space as far as possible apart to still make them, and the wind that screws with your jumps over instant death pits. Mighty number 6 himself is what I want to dig into. This guy has 3 attacks. He'll strafe both sides of the screen, covering the entire stage in bullets, which are impossible to dodge until you've died enough times to spot this little gap that requires a ridiculously precise jump to dodge through. His second attack is to drop bombs on the platforms in 2 distinct patterns, and trying to dodge the bombs by sight just gets you killed by falling into the pits to either side of the stage, so you have to memorize the patterns to dodge them before they actually drop.
Tragedy today when a local robot, H number 9, jumped from a broadcast tower.
And just what I need for an infuriating boss, for him to mock me every time that I die. The boss has so much health that this battle is a damn endurance test. If you haven't memorized all of its attacks, just one will end up killing you, especially with the bits that kill you for screwing up for 1 second. God damn it! I ended up playing his entire irritating level 3 times before I finally managed to kill this douche because there is no reflex strategy or skill here. The bosses do not reward anything except rote memorization. Now, Mega Man had this same general format. 3 lives, restart the level when you lose them. Back in those days, that was downright nice. But Mega Man's levels were short, easy, and not specifically designed to suck out your lives. Dying in Mega Man due to a lack of skill and replaying a short level was fine, but dying exclusively due to terrible game design and then replaying a 15-minute precision death trap laden level in Mighty number 9 is just infuriating, especially when you die often because trial and error is the only way to fight the bosses. I'm not saying the game sucks because it's not Mega Man, I'm saying the game adds elements to the Mega Man formula that directly clash with said formula. They threw in design elements from those games and didn't design around them. The game does throw you a bone by giving you power-ups if you die repeatedly in a level. Most of them are useless because 98% of the time you die it's from falling, but if you suck hard enough it'll start dropping extra lives. After I beat a few levels I found out there's an option to crank up your number of lives to 10 instead of 3, and you will save yourself a ton of headaches doing this. Once I cranked up my lives to 10, the game actually became fairly enjoyable because you're not being kicked back to the start of the level every time you get blindsided by a tough jump or a boss. It's honestly shocking how much this simple change, allowing you to screw up a few times without getting punished too badly, dramatically improves the game and removes a ton of frustration from it. Killing Mighty number 6 gives you the Aviator weapon, which lets you jump higher and fall slower, which is pretty much the only help you ever get with the platforming, but the actual projectile this thing fires is worthless. It just goes out a few inches, then floats up a little and then comes back, and its pattern completely changes depending on where you're standing. It's so random and difficult to predict that I can't hit a damn thing with it. Hit him. Come on, hit him! You know, a lot of people complain about the rock in Friday the 13th, but at least you know what the damn rock is going to do every time you throw it. The sick thing is, I actually ended up using this weapon a lot because as it sits there doing nothing and being shit, it can land a bunch of hits on the bosses. It wrecked the shit of this Pong boss pretty well. Yeah, I'm fighting Pong in 2016. And someone was so impressed with using Pong as a boss that they make you fight Pong twice in one level. And this minor bit of usefulness the aviator weapon gives you is far more help than most of the other weapons can claim. Exactly 4 of the game's weapons are useful. The ice weapon lets you shoot down and deals damage over time, making it a fairly effective boss killer. The battalion weapon, which is basically the crash bomb from Mega Man 2, has a huge blast radius and can be remote detonated, letting you hit a ton of enemies you otherwise couldn't hit. The voltage weapon sucks on toast. It fires out 5 gizmos that slowly do damage over time, and these gizmos disappear the second that you dash. And the game is built for you to dash every few seconds. Did anybody actually think about how the mechanics actually work together? But you'll still use this piece of shit because it's the only weapon that shoots diagonally, and there are so many obnoxiously placed airborne enemies you otherwise can't hit. The sniper weapon runs out of ammo after 3 or 4 shots. The fire weapon allows you to blow yourself up, but you have to charge it to give it any decent range, and you have to charge it from scratch for every single shot. Not exactly useful in a high-speed platformer with twitch reflexes. I honestly tried to use the seismic weapon. It turns you into a tractor that charges forward, but every time I attacked an enemy with it, I just bounced right off, it didn't kill the guy, and then I took damage. The last weapon is a crappy sword with 0 range. That's worthless for killing anything. I'm told the sword is terribly coded to where it makes you invincible every time you swing it. I wouldn't know. Honestly, this game pisses me off enough without dying constantly from trying to use a weapon that's useless. I also got killed a lot frantically trying to navigate the list of powers mid-fight for the weapon I wanted. It's super clunky. You can map 3 weapon changes to certain controller buttons for quick changes, and I guess that explains why only 3 of the weapons are actually worth a shit. You can get tremendously boned if you try to play the levels out of order, which you have no idea what that order is. Number 4's level is downright suicidal without the battalion weapon because it has a puzzle specifically designed to mock the fact that you can't shoot down. Battalion's level is suicidal without the freeze gun because it's full of mines that are impossible to avoid because, again, you can't shoot down. 5 mines in a row that you have to go through and explode to proceed. Kiss my ass. Mighty Number 2's level is the requisite ice level with a ton of jumps over slippery instant death pits, and it has a jump that's downright nightmarish without the propeller. Just look at this. You have to dash onto this tiny platform in midair, and you can't grab the ledge or otherwise recover from this jump. Dash too early, you brush the wall and die. Dash too late, you brush the wall and die. Dash while a little too far to the left, you undershoot and die. Dash while a little too far to the right, and you overshoot and die. And even if you make the jump, you can still slip off and die. This jump requires you to have memorized the exact distance the dash carries you and dash in 1 magic pixel of a spot. I had to replay this entire level twice after bumping the lives up because of this one freaking jump. Mighty Number 2 is the right name for this level. I feel like I was talking about something. Oh, right. The sword guy's level is nothing but jumping over an eternal instant death pit with enemies who are specifically designed to knock you into the pit that you can't hit without the electric or battalion weapons. And Mighty Number 8's level is just one long, featureless corridor that only ends if you've landed enough hits on the boss. And he warps into spots that are extremely difficult to hit without the other weapons.
Run along now, little doggy.
That's Steve Blum as the voice of Mighty Number 8, by the way. They had to scrounge together their entire budget on Kickstarter, but they could land one of the biggest voice actors in the industry. This whole play the levels out of order thing is another flaw that's been carried over from Mega Man, but it's a flaw you'd think would have been ironed out after 2.5 decades. Okay, now even though I spent the bulk of this video loudly bitching about Mighty Number 9 on a basic fundamental design level, the game isn't all bad. Cranking up the number of lives so you're not replaying entire levels constantly makes most of the levels kind of fun. I really liked Mighty Number 3's level because it's just shooting robots over some basic platforming without any bullshit, okay, with one minor piece of bullshit. The dashing mechanics are fun to play with when the game isn't shoving these mechanics down your throat and punishing you for not using them correctly, and the game's gimmick of having bosses you've beaten help you out in certain levels is a really cool twist. The most infuriating thing about Mighty Number 9 is that there's a good game in here somewhere that's desperately struggling for breath under layers of smothering caked on bullshit, but when, by sheer luck, you hit a level without any bullshit, it can be a pretty entertaining game. After you've beaten the mighty numbers, you have to fix a berserk robot factory, a level with 3 bosses and a ton of bullshit insta-kill jumps, and then break into Blackwell's prison. The prison level is where you play as Call, Beck's female robot sidekick, whose dress is cut so short it bears her ass when she bends over, and for some reason is designed with an arrow pointing straight to her vagina. Call can't dash into enemies and has a shitty gun that does almost nothing, and you can use her in an online co-op mode. Doesn't that sound fun? I thought this was a pretty cool little stealth level until I found out nothing happens if you get caught. The enemies fire on you once, don't even bother to aim at you, and then the alarm is killed. Worst security ever! Dr. White figures out the robot rebellion is due to an old robot of his called Trinity, who has the ability to assimilate other robots like the Borg. The CEO turned Trinity loose for incredibly vague reasons that are never explored. We also learned Dr. Blackwell actually saved the world the first time the CEO tried this exact plan and Trinity went apeshit, but he took the fall for the CEO's plan. It's kind of a fun, and I'm betting unintentional, inversion of the Mega Man games. The Dr. Wily stand-in is a noble hero, while the Dr. Light stand-in is, honestly, probably more villainous than the actual villain. It's kind of impressive that I grew to utterly despise Dr. White as much as I did. Dr. White gave Trinity one prime directive, to evolve by any means necessary. And it didn't occur to him that expressly programming Trinity to eat every robot it could find might be a bad idea. When he figured out Trinity was a doomsday machine waiting to happen, Dr. White just up and quit Cherry Dynamics, completely running away from his screw-up and pretending it never happened, and just let Trinity sit in the bin for someone to activate and doom the planet. It takes Dr. White forever to recognize Trinity's code behind the rogue robots, meaning he doesn't recognize his own work, and he never figured out she was responsible for the previous outbreak, content instead to let his dad rot in prison for stopping his idiot son's doomsday machine. This all on top of the fact he's a holier-than-thou hypocrite chastising all around him for making weapons as he makes his living building military bots. Military bots that are defective, by the way. It drove me crazy the entire game why Beck is built with a childlike personality and is specifically programmed to despise violence when he's a combat droid built in an entire line of combat droids. And I think someone on the dev team asked my exact question because in one of the last levels, Call asked, "Doctor, why is Beck such a pansy?" It turns out Dr. White specifically programs his robots to be reluctant to violence. And I remind you, this douche sells robots to the military. He's giving the people protecting our nation weapons that don't want to shoot. Anti-violence preaching hippies sold the military a robot that is literally a gun with legs. Dr. White is a narcissistic hypocrite, a coward who refuses to own up to anything he's done, and he's a blithering naive moron. The moment where I would have given anything to ram Beck's metal boot up his ass came right before the last level. Dr. White tells Beck, "Oh, Trinity isn't evil. She just doesn't understand how to use her powers. You have to show her how to use her powers, and then everything will be fine." Trinity is on her second attempt to blow up the planet, and Dr. White is still doing everything in his power to salvage a homicidal glorified can opener. Just shoot the bitch! Trinity's level has more instant death jumps, plus a section where you use the propeller to traverse a massive instant death chasm, and the propeller runs out of power and kills you about halfway across. The major pain in the ass with Trinity's level are these round enemies. You shoot them and they turn into blocks you can climb and then disintegrate, and you have to shoot them in specific ways to traverse the level. Often they immediately respawn, and sometimes they wait to respawn, and sometimes they only respawn after you jump, and they're only supposed to respawn if there are more of them touching one another, but sometimes they just respawn anyway, and sometimes they respawn if you walk to one specific part of the level, and one time I only got one to stop respawning by shooting the block next to it down to one hit away from death, only that exact same tactic didn't work on the exact same enemy later, and how do these things work? Trinity herself is by far the worst boss in the game. All her attacks require a ton of careful memorization, and this boss has 2 phases with no checkpoint or health in between. It basically ensures that you'll have to go through her entire level at least 4 times to get enough shots at her to get the patterns down, and that's if you bumped up the lives like I did. I still can't believe the final boss is missing several frames of animation. This close to the finish line, the devs have lost the last few shits they had to give. So you beat Trinity, and they couldn't be buggered to make a real ending, so just look at these still images with no narration or context. I guess the money went to getting Steve Blum in the studio to record 3 lines. The game's end credits list out each of the game's Kickstarter contributors. There's more than 70,000. It takes the credits 4 hours to run in their entirety, and most of the backers are anonymous anyway. There's also a post-credits scene where Dr. White gets Blackwell out of prison. Now, here's how the conversation would have gone if Dr. White were a decent human being. Hey, Dad, sorry I never came to visit you in prison even though you were only in here because I built a doomsday machine and didn't do a single thing to stop it. I'm sorry I doubted you and never questioned your guilt for a single second, and thanks for saving the world from my humongous cock-up. Can you ever forgive me? And here's how the conversation actually goes, because Dr. White is a worthless shit stain of a human being. Trinity has free will! I'm going to make a ton of robots with free will and single-handedly revolutionize the entire planet! Son, didn't you just finish saving the world from the first time you tried this and it bit you in the ass? Fuck you! I'm not your son! I'm just saying, have you ever seen a Terminator movie? This never ends well. Everybody who doubted me will finally realize my genius! So, were you planning on making Dr. White a villain? Because if he's still supposed to be the main good guy after this exchange, you need to stop writing things. So that was Mighty Number 9, and I like parts of it. The game is bogged down with annoying-ass level designs, horribly designed enemies, bosses that are tests of memorization rather than any relevant skill, a crappy story, hit-or-miss voice acting, half the weapons suck, and an unfocused design that keeps old flaws for posterity and adds new mechanics that don't gel for the sake of progress. And yet, when the game, by total accident, hits a stretch without any bullshit, just running around blowing up robots and nimbly dashing over levels, it can be pretty fun. It's definitely a mixed bag, and if I hadn't cranked up the number of lives, I'd be firmly in the hate camp with everyone else. It's not good, it's not horrible, so where does that leave us? I guess I can say, it's better than nothing.